Hello,
Good afternoon. How you doing?
not bad. How are you?
I'm all right.
By the way, I just sometimes I've been like busy with multiple stuff. So if you need reviews and on PR and stuff, like feel free to just ping me on the Slack or something like that directly.
Okay,
I
no
may
problem.
I may sometime miss the notification, so please don't.
Oh,
I
I'm not even. And I'll probably have Max do it because I'm not even on Slack, and I'm trying to avoid yet another having to go through approval for that.
Oh, you need approval to be on a Slack?
Uh, yeah. Hey, there's
Okay.
Max now. But
Hey,
I did tag you. I was gonna say on something this morning that Rita asked, but that's of 0 time sensitivity, so
Okay.
don't worry about it.
I'll check. Let it go.
Yeah, it just has to do with versioning and stuff. So,
I see.
hey, Max.
How come
hey,
Max is using Slack and
Oh, you can get it.
you're
I
not?
just don't. I just haven't gone through the.
Oh, I
Yeah.
see. Interesting. But it like I don't like. Is there any particular reason they want approval to use Slack?
I mean, I was supposed to, yeah, to, I think everybody's supposed to use probably Google Groups or whatever, right? I did notice we're using Teams we're using Zoom for this, which I thought was funny. So
What's the
yeah,
internal
CNCF
communicator at
uses.
Google?
have a Zoom's license, yeah.
Okay. What internal thing you use at Google? Like we use Teams, right? So do you?
Oh, what is ours even called? Google Meet, I
Meets.
guess. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
I was gonna
M
say
E
it's
E
built into
T.
Gmail and everything else, so I don't really think of it always necessarily as a separate product, if that kind of makes sense.
Got it.
But these ones are
Yeah, it
all
has
good.
like video conferencing equipment and the whole bit. I do
Hmm.
wish it integrated with Zoom for these things, though.
Oh,
Uh,
the physical equipment.
yeah, because I don't know if you've seen us three try to be in the same conference room. It just doesn't work very well.
Yeah.
Mm.
So I just found an empty room.
Oh yeah, no, I get what you're saying. Yeah, you don't want to put like 3 laptops all dialed into the same meeting. So yeah,
Yeah. Either we're all in on like headsets, which is like weird, or
you can still get echo from that, to be honest. But yeah,
oh, okay, yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
because
you
you've got
got,
three
yeah,
active
we're
mics in the
very,
room with.
yeah.
I see Rita is on here and some other Davis, Alex.
Hi.
I was gonna say, Max, it's weird. It's warmer up here now in Seattle than it is down there where you are. So there you go. It's supposed to be sunny and low 70s here today. I
We
think
don't talk about that, Andrew.
past in San Francisco this morning. So
We don't talk about weather, Andrew. It
oh,
gets changed easily.
right, it's really rainy up here. Don't come here. I forgot.
uh, sorry, rooting through like spicy jokes about work stuff. I like the view out your window though.
Yeah, it's pretty good today.
It's really sunny.
Yeah, yesterday though was overcast though, so that's just the
It's
luck
very
of the draw.
foresty.
I didn't know you
Uh,
were in Seattle.
I am nominally I'm in Seattle. Yeah, Seattle's actually probably about 45-minute drive. But yeah.
You're in South, right? You said, Andrew?
Yeah, I'm south. I'm out actually on the Kitsap Peninsula near Tacoma.
Right.
So it's more foresty out here than the city. But for the Seattle folks, yes, I have lived in the city before. So especially, I went to undergrad at the University of Washington. So,
Oh, that's cool.
so
Yeah, I like the UW area. It's really good.
Yeah.
All right, shall we meet? Or are we waiting on anyone? Or
We can start.
cool. Looks like Davis, you have the first one.
Yeah, I'm just bringing this up because, can you guys hear me, by the way? Yeah, I'm just bringing this up because someone in Slack was asking about it. I wanted to gauge everyone's thoughts on graduating the workload expansion feature to beta. I don't think we've had any real issues so far. There's one issue about it in GitHub right now, but I think it's a case of them holding it wrong, fairly sure. And I feel pretty confident about the shape of the expansion template CRD. But if anyone has any objections, I'd be interested to hear. Cool, I guess not. So I can make a change to our docs to just say it's beta, basically.
Yeah, docs and the new CRD, or update the CRD schema.
Right.
The one gotcha, I think, is that is it the thing we tried to do now is like a phased in rollout of the storage version, right? So like right now the only version out is V1 Alpha 1, right? Presumably we're gonna like take that same schema, call it V1 Beta 1, and move that as the default version, but also CRDs let you specify a storage version, which is basically the shape that is persisted in the API server. And for rollbacks, keeping the storage version at n-1 for at least one version lets people roll back to the old manifest and still be able to retrieve their expansion templates.
Okay, that's like some scaffolding that we set, right?
No, it's just a thing, a best practice.
But with respect to setting the storage version, that's just like a queue builder scaffolding thing, right?
It's a field on the CRD. Like there's in the schema, I think it's like storage version true, and you can only set it for one of the schemas in the list of schemas for the CRD.
Got it. Cool, good to know.
Yeah, those are all the gotchas I could think of.
Very exciting.
Yeah.
We gotta push some updates between releases, y'all.
No, update the libraries is fine. No, I'm just kidding. No, we have major updates. The VAP is getting pretty close, I think. Like and I'm slowly going into the next topic. So someone stop me if they're not done with this topic. We just need a shape for the VAP engine, right? Remember how I said I was gonna like push that code and it would be a prototype, but I did want to get, people's feedback rather than just throw out a VAP design. Rita, someone from Microsoft did reach out to me to ask me like, hey, when will we know the shape of the VAP engine? So I think you're interested in this. I don't know.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, We've been working on this for a long time. It's just a matter of getting it ready to merge, right? Yeah. But was there any, I mean, other than your POC, right? Like, was there any concerns you had?
Yeah, and no, like VAP is validating admission policy. So that's the SAL cap, basically. So there's two kind of use cases here, right? That I think we're going to want to look at eventually. One of them is just taking gatekeeper constraint templates, right, and projecting them onto validating admission policy, right? And then another use case would be, hey, I have a VAP object because like people are starting to just write these in the wild, and I'd like to bring that into Gatekeeper because I want to use shift left, I want to use audit, but what I don't want to do is like majorly rewrite my policies, right? I just want to use these prepackaged ones. What does that look like? And I don't think these two use cases necessarily need the same solution, right? There's no reason why we can't have two engines, right? If it makes sense to do so, for instance. I think the right thing to do, because VAP isn't public yet, is to start with the Gatekeeper one, right? Because that is a smaller surface area, right? And we can sort of control what gets exposed to stuff that we know works well as VAP evolves, right? Whereas if we try to say, no, we'll bring your VAP policy and we'll try to do our best to like just make it work with the Gatekeeper, then we need solid answers to things like, okay, VAP matches off of resource, right? But resource doesn't exist shift left. It's all kind instead, right? So you know, what does that look like, right? Or VAP also has some built-ins for querying the authorizer, right? Basically doing RBAC checks. And unless you're the API server, that's not really something we can do. And so developing stories for those friction points, I think, is a heavier lift. So that's the first bit, right? I think we provide more value faster, less broken value. If we start with constraint template first and defer the other story until things are more clear.
I think, I mean, I've been gone for a couple weeks, so I don't know, maybe there's a lot that's happened since then. I think last time when we were talking about this, you had pushed the framework updates, right, into Gatekeeper. So in theory now we could, right, that's what we talked about. The next step would be just take one of the example constraint templates and replace the Rego with cell logic, right?
Right. Well, there's an intermediate step there,
Okay.
right? Of like what fields do we have, right? And for instance, if we want to project Gatekeeper onto VAP, one thing we want to be able to do is to take the, say, kind match criteria, right? And add that logic back in, because VAP doesn't match against kind by default, but does allow for cell expressions to do arbitrary matching. So we can inject that code in.
Gotcha. So you want like more native constraint template integration, not just like raw cell, basically.
Right. Well, I mean, and to be clear, cell is just the expression language, right? Like
Right.
cell will only ever have one line of code, essentially. And then VAP is like a bunch of cell expressions clustered together, just to be pedantic. But and so the benefit would be to add in things that we use that VAP doesn't have, but also to provide a surface area that doesn't rely on things that VAP has, but we cannot support shift left or in audit.
Makes sense.
All right. And then it's just, well, okay, given that, what should the shape be? Because then we have a little bit more freedom of creativity, right? Maybe make things easier, maybe not. I don't know.
Right, but just to clarify, even without like say the match kind integration, it would work today, no?
VAP works. I have a working prototype.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah, that basically takes the wholesale VAP object and does what it can. There's certain fields that if you were to specify them, they would have no effect, right? Like version conversion, for instance, like that expressiveness is still there in my prototype. But because, again, we're not the API server, it's not really something we can support. So rough edges like that, right? Where for something that is like up-resing from VAP to constraint templates, we would want to have a principled answer for that, but we can avoid doing so if we're going from gatekeeper to VAP. And then maybe we just don't want to have those fields, right? But then...
Absolutely. Or like, I don't know, like enforcement action, is that something else we want to integrate? I don't know. Basically everything that exists today, right? Like, does it make sense for VAP? And if so, how, right? Like, I think that's the, okay. Yeah, I'm totally makes sense as the next step.
If you want, I could just put together one or more examples over the next week. And then, okay.
Hopefully I'll have some more bandwidth to come back to this after 128 release.
No.
Yeah, but the other thing I want to come back to is the like converting, like creating the VAP resources in the cluster, right, for validation. Nobody's screaming, so that can wait, I guess.
Yeah, like that stuff, those Kubernetes versions aren't even really in the wild, right?
No.
It'll be a few months.
Nobody's crying or anything.
Yeah, like this, it would be good for us to get ahead of that because we could provide a soft transition.
Right. But it's not urgent. Yeah. Anything else for VAP?
I mean, once we know the schema, like we get audit for free. Actually creating the VAP objects, we can defer, I think, because again, those clusters aren't in the wild. But if it works for audit, it'll work on the webhook. It'll work shift left. Yeah, I think schema is like the first step and unblocks most of the pre-general, I don't want to say availability, but like permeation of VAP into the greater ecosystem. So I think that's the right timing.
Okay.
And you say converting cities to VAP, is it the built-in conversion or library kind of thing?
Sorry, what I can't quite hear.
Oh, Rita is taking the notes, right? So I think one of the points she wrote is converting existing constraints to VAP.
Oh, like the Rego stuff, right? Like we have kind of like the examples, right? The demos, the libraries.
So that's why I was asking. So like updating and not the code that automatically converts or something like that, right? I'm not sure if that's the
I don't
case.
think you can automatically convert. That would be some tool though.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking.
Because the tool would have to know both Rego and Cell. Whoa.
Yeah, honestly, if you could auto convert from Rego to Cell, a lot of these conversations that people have been having about like computational complexity and limiting big O notation and all of that would be moot, right? And it would be more about, is it better to have Rego and put in the effort to like build this conversion, or is it better to just like go straight from Cell? I'm talking about like at the Kubernetes API server level conversations, right? Because a lot of the selection criteria for cell, from what I could tell, was around complexity and computational complexity and operational concerns.
I see.
How hard would it be to do something like that? I think it sounds hard, but
well, I don't think it's. I think it's possible for probably a certain subset of Rego, right? I mean, in theory, it might be possible for any volume of Rego. What gives me pause, however, would be if you have something that depends on the shape of the input, right? Because Rego does have this, I forget what the name of it is, but basically you can flatten out your Rego code, right?
Oh.
And it like optimizes
Is it a Rego
it.
parser?
Not the Rego parser. This is an OPA command.
Interesting.
And it is sort of meant for like pre-computation or pre-evaluation. Let me see, maybe it OPA command line. Maybe this will jog my memory here. OPA build, OPA check, OPA deck. I'll run sign test version. Nope, nothing is. No, you parse and print the abstract syntax tree. Interesting. Build data files into pub. Yeah, it's not popping out. But basically, this is. I think they were using it for a while. There's this use case for OPA where you could use it to generate the where queries for SQL, if that makes sense, right? Like basically you could limit the visibility of a table query to only fields that the user should be able to access by appending a where clause. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say like it's probably interesting because I'm curious when you say it flattens out what it does, because I think it needs some kind of a parser in order to know what kind of Rego has been written so that we can convert it into cell. But I don't know.
Oh yeah, well, to be clear, it writes out
Parsers.
Rego. It's just like flattened Rego. So it's from Rego to Rego, but
Okay.
it's meant to be faster executing, I think was the idea.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, sorry, I wish I could remember off the top of my head the command. I
It's
do
fine.
remember, however, like feeding it in one of the more complex constraint templates and it running for a long time and generating a big old thing of text because the inputs weren't very constrained.
cool. Anything else?
Yeah, I want to quickly touch base on that external data response thing again. So Max, I went back and checked. There is an idempotent response that we do get from the provider. So now I updated the code to sort of just preserve that rather than be doing anything with it. My only question there is, and it kind of gets tricky. So the way we are doing that is like right now with this cache is we are so when we get input from the Rego, right, or the template like that, here are like let's say 4 keys. Out of that 4 keys, let's say 2 are already in the cache and 2 are not. So we are only calling an external data provider for those 2 keys. Okay, and we'll get a response back. So the idempotent or not will be in the context of those 2 keys that we got from the provider, correct? But that the original 2 keys that we have from the cache, we don't know the idempotency of that. And when we actually send back the response, I'm combining those 4 keys again, right? Preparing the response and then do the normal operation. Correct? So I'm kind of bit confused on the how the idempotency would work there, or actually how it may or may not affect.
So yeah, you kind of lost me a bit. I think what I heard was, so you reach out to the external data provider with, say, a number of keys. It returns back idempotent. Is it, you're saying that whether it's idempotent or not is associated with the response, not every individual key. Is that correct?
Correct, correct. Exactly,
Okay.
exactly.
Okay. Yeah, and so like the most logically conservative thing would be to reassociate. Like, so when you're caching, just say, well, this key is for all the keys where there's an idempotent tag, right? Put idempotent in the response, or sorry, in the cache. You know, just treat that as a global value that's relevant for all keys in the response. And then obviously if the same key, you make a different query and it comes back without that idempotent tag, now you have a new cache and it doesn't have the word idempotent in it. And then what you could do is just like, if all the keys have this idempotent flag, then you can say, well, yeah, this query is idempotent. The intent of the idempotent flag, though, was to be at the provider level when we designed it, right? So it should be if one key is, or if one response says idempotent true, they also should say true, right? It's not really meant to be conditioned on the contents of the query.
Yeah, I think my question would be then, is idempotency has any impact on cache? Because I'm assuming there will be, like, whenever we get a set of keys to query against the external data provider, few of them will be in the cache, and let's say few of them will not be in the cache. So we'll actually query them out, right? Uh, so does the idempotency of the keys that we get from data provider versus from the cache, does those matter? Is what I'm asking.
I don't follow. Like, so there's
Okay.
one data provider, right?
So okay, so there are, like, let's say we got 4 keys A, B, C, D. Okay.
Mhm.
And we found that A and B are already in the cache. So we need to only call the provider for C and D. Okay.
Okay.
And in C and D's response, I get idempotent is equals to true.
Mhm.
Okay. Now for A and B, I don't have that information. Like, what was the idempotency, right?
Well, why don't you have that information?
I just didn't know. That's what I'm trying to understand.
Well, but A and B are from the cache, right?
Correct. So the way I've implemented currently, I'm not storing whether the keys that I mean, whenever I'm populating a cache, I'm not maintaining their idempotency in the cache right now.
I'm saying you need to, on some
Okay.
level, maintain it in the
Okay.
cache.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So here is my follow-up question. So let's say I do have, let's again take that for example, A, B, and C, D. Okay. Now C and D, which I got from the provider, has idempotent is equals to true, but A and B does not. Like, their idempotent is false. What I'm doing right now is, I'm at the end of all this exercise, cache versus provider, I'm combining all 4 keys, create a response, and then send it back, the usual flow, right? So when we combine those 4 keys, right, at the end of the operation, 2 would have idempotent true, 2 would have idempotent false. What does that mean?
Right, and the protocol only gives a idempotent flag for the entire response, not per key.
Correct. Correct.
That's what I was saying. The most logically conservative thing would be to just set idempotent false, unless you know that all keys are idempotent true, right? Because realistically, what we're looking at is if something is idempotent, we can use it in a place. If it is not idempotent, we can't. Right.
Okay.
And so if you take the pessimistic interpretation and say, well, we can't use all of these, so therefore we can't use any of them, right? Then you're not using any data where it otherwise shouldn't be used. However, it is also, as I was saying, the intent of the idempotent flag was to be more about the provider than the specific key, right? Like, it shouldn't be the case that a provider is giving idempotent answers or not based off of the key that is provided to it.
Then in that
Go
case,
ahead.
then why are we bothered by idempotency? Like if it's for a provider level and it's not at the key level, right? Why are we just ignoring it or just set it to whatever the latest we get from provider?
Okay, so if we're not, if we're ignoring it, why would we have it at all, right? So there is a point for having idempotence, right? Otherwise, we wouldn't have written it. And that point is if you use non-idempotent providers for mutation, you're breaking requirement that K8s has for mutators, right? Which is that mutation webhooks need to be idempotent. And obviously, like, if you're feeding it to some external process that's giving you a non-idempotent answer, then it's not, that loop is not an idempotent loop, right?
Got it.
So, let me finish because I think it's somewhat important. Forcing the provider to declare whether they're idempotent or not is basically giving the provider the chance to say whether it is suitable for mutation or not. Like, we can't control whether the provider lies, obviously, but at least we make it an intentional act, right? And lessen the likelihood of just accidental something being used where it shouldn't be, right?
So I think what I'm hearing, like the implementation should be, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but in that same example, let's say we get a response back for key C and D, then we will sort of flatten that out. Let's say we got idempotent true for C and D. Then in cache, we will say for C, idempotent is true, for D, idempotent is true. Now, let's say in A and B, similarly, previously when I got the response, I have said, I got it idempotent as false. So for both A and B, the idempotent flag is false. So at the end of the day, when I combine it, if I get any idempotent is equals to false, for the whole response, I'm gonna set it to false. If all the keys in my in the context has idempotent is true, then only I'm gonna set idempotent is equals to true for the entire response back.
Yeah, I mean, that I think that's the most conservative approach. Another thing we could do, like, I forget what we've said the protocol version is, right? If it's still alpha for external data providers or not. If we really do want to support this conditional idempotence key, like idempotence being conditional based off of the key, we could move where idempotent is being reported. Or we could change the wording around the contract, right? And say, like, no, you are either always idempotent or not, right? And then I would be a bit more certain about, well, you don't need to like spend that extra bit caching that true false per key, and you could just like cache it on a per provider basis. Like, it's not clear like if that's a space savings, but it is easier logic to write.
I mean, the other one is also easier. I don't think that complex. It's just like, I mean, from the logic perspective, what we discussed, like the conservative approach, that's easier to. I just have to add one more field and map it. But I just checked the external data is v1 beta 1. So
Gotcha. Well, that's the external data resource, right? Not the external data call and response, right? Like kind of how the admission request is something that the API server sends to admission webhooks, right? And that is a Kubernetes resource with a version. We do the same thing for the external data protocol. Excuse me, and for the same reasons, right? We want to provide backwards compatibility, what would you call it? Like a way of representing the backwards compatibility expectations, right? And version information, and perhaps ways of converting between the versions for the wire protocol between external data providers and Gatekeeper.
okay, cool. So okay, cool. I'll update the logic again just to follow our conservative approach for now, and maybe we can take it from there.
Okay. Yeah. Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Any other thoughts or questions? Do we want to get 20 minutes back? I see nods for 20 minutes back. All right.
Bye bye.
Good to see everyone.